Viticulture is the critical first step of winemaking. The quality of a wine begins with the conditions of the site and the human decisions in the vineyard.
Farming's a verb. It's an activity. It's a proactive concept. So you stick something in the ground and then you can't sit back on the porch and watch it happen. You have to actively engage in it.
The location of a vineyard has an undeniable impact on the character of the grapes grown.
It all starts with variety. And once you kind of have that perspective of knowing what variety does well, what's going to make the best wine for your particular land, then it's really important to really understand your soil.
And that's part of, the skill of farming. You pick the right spot for the right variety, and hopefully there's a market for that particular variety when you grow it.
Geographical factors that impact grape growing include latitude, elevation, aspect, and slope. Nearby water and mountains can also have a moderating effect that is essential in many of the world's great wine regions. Climate is defined as the average weather conditions over time. It encompasses myriad factors, from temperature to sunlight to wind. Heat accumulation throughout the growing season is measured in degree days. The optimum amount of heat required for grapes to achieve ripeness varies by variety.
So in these cooler areas, you don't have the degree days. It's not as hot during the day. So we need to plant earlier ripening grapes like Pinot Noir and Chardonnay so we can get that full maturity.
Sunlight is essential for photosynthesis and flavor development, but too much causes sunburn and raisoning.
As you're laying out a vineyard, it's really important that the road direction and sunlight. So you really want to make sure that this afternoon sun is on the non-exposed part of where the fruit is.
While water is essential to the productivity of the vine, wine grapes are less reliant than many crops.
We like to refer to a vineyard as a desert plant because it has more behavior of desert plant rather than a tropical water hog plant.
Dry summertime conditions or poor water holding capacity necessitates the use of irrigation.
Tantamount to fruit quality is knowing how much stress for the site you have, for the variety you have, for the markets you have, to determine when you're going to start that first irrigation, and then when the subsequent irrigations will be, and the duration of those subsequent irrigations.
Once a vine is at full maturity, we're looking to give it a little amount of water as possible. So with that, now with all the science and technology and instruments we have, is we can really understand the stress level of the plant, we can understand how much the plant's using, how much the plant needs.
Soil type determines the amount of water that is available to the vine and provides for its nutrient needs.
It's nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, and then as far as the macronutrients that we need, we're very lucky here in that a lot of Sonoma County sites need very, very little fertilizer.
The interaction of climate, soil, and geography, in combination with human decisions and traditions, can provide a wine with a sense of place.
But a grapevine is a vine. It'll grow between a crack in the sidewalk. And so we have to tame it.
Viticultural decisions, from vineyard architecture to clonal and rootstock selection, are made to complement the unique conditions of each site. Grapevines are susceptible to the soil parasite phylloxera, so resistant rootstock is often used to protect the vine.
So if you look right here, this is the graft union that was made with a machine on a grafting bench. And so this part would have been the Calera clone Pinot Noir on the top, which is the signwood, and then this was the rootstock on the bottom, and they were joined together with the machine and then put into a callousing house, which is high humidity at about 80 degrees temperature for several weeks, and then came out calloused and then brought to a field and planted in the field.
Rootstock is a key component because that's really going to set the foundation for the plant. With it, there's hundreds of different rootstocks. We're very fortunate with all the research that's out there that we can pair the rootstocks with a particular soil.
When establishing a new vineyard, growers must consider vine density, as well as row spacing and orientation.
The fields I was prepped, obviously, with big equipment. Then we lay it out, put the marks where we want every stake and vine to be. Then we put the stakes in, and then we come through and we dig a hole. It's going to be about almost a foot deep, and then we plant the vine in that.
Planning is the first step in a long process. During the first few years, the focus is on establishing the roots, trunk, and cordons.
At 3 years, you'll get a little fruit. 4th, you'll get a little more. 5th year is when they really go into full production.
Vine training starts the year after planting. When you plant a vine, whatever grows on the top, that first year we always cut back to a 2-bud spur. The idea behind the first year of planting is that we're growing a root system on the vines.
The training system refers to the shape of the vine's permanent wood.
Vines are therefore cane pruned, or they're cordoned, trained, and spur pruned.
The trunk of the vine is analogous to a tree trunk. It's the vertical, woody portion of the vine. Cordon-trained vines have one or more horizontal extensions of the trunk. Along the cordon, there are vertical, permanent wood structures called arms. Each arm typically has 2 spurs, which are short sections of last year's canes left behind after pruning. Each spur contains 1 to 3 dormant buds. These buds will become shoots, the vertical green growth that emerges each season. Along the shoot at each node, there are leaves, clusters, tendrils, and next year's buds. Each shoot has between 1 and 3 berry clusters. At the end of the growing season, shoots lignify or become woody and are called canes. On cane-pruned vines, 1 or more canes attached directly to the trunk are tied down each year. Next year's shoots will push from dormant buds along the cane. With the exception of head-pruned vines, which have arms with spurs growing directly out of the trunk, grapevines require trellising systems for support. Trellising systems range from lyre to California sprawl to high-trained pergolas. Vertical shoot positioning, or VSP, is an important modern trellising system where shoots are trained straight up.
And what that's allowed us to do is as we plant closer together, we get better sunlight, we get better efficiency for getting equipment through, and the most important thing is it allows us to manage the canopy better.
Canopy management is an ongoing process for us all the time. We do several passes a year through the vineyard, and by manipulating the growth up the trellis wire. It doesn't just grow naturally up into a vertical trellis, it actually has to be manipulated up.
Canopy management can increase airflow and sunlight in the fruiting zone and decrease disease pressure. Techniques include shoot positioning, removing leaves and laterals, suckering, and hedging. Farmers influence soil fertility and water availability by managing the vineyard floor. Cover crops are used to reduce excess soil moisture or are mowed to minimize competition.
Mostly the way we use cover crops is delivered organic matter back to the soil or fixed nitrogen back in the soil. So we always have some kind of purpose that we're putting the cover crop in for.
Some vineyards till nitrogen-rich cover crops into the soil, removing plants that compete with the vine for water.
Non-till would be you never turn the soil over with any kind of an implement. You simply mow the cover crops down every year, and that does a number of things. Once, it conserves your soil. It holds nutrients in the soil better.
The annual cycle of the vine begins with pruning, which makes way for new shoots that will grow from dormant buds in the coming season.
What we're doing with pruning is we're actually taking the vines and setting them up for the next year and deciding how much crop we want on each vine and how much each vine can handle by then pruning it back.
On spur-pruned vines, the canes from the previous year are removed, leaving only spurs that contain 1 to 3 buds each. On cane-pruned vines, 1 or more of the canes from the previous year are retained and tied down, and the rest of last year's wood is cut away. During bud break, the dormant buds swell until the first leaves emerge, marking the beginning of the growing season.
The shoot that exists in tight buds that have not even swollen yet, haven't pushed yet, inside that bud, and it's all within, half a centimeter.
The shoots elongate telescopically, revealing leaves, flower clusters, and next year's buds.
And what's interesting is that the act of bloom is actually pollination, because grapevines are self-fertilized. So that pollen that are on the anthers, which are surrounding that flower, is all that it needs.
Successful pollination requires warm temperatures. After bloom comes fruit set, where each pollinated flower turns into a berry.
And fruit set is everything to this commodity. So you may have many, many flowers that are there, and they're looking beautiful, and the flowers are all out. If you don't have sufficient fruit set, the number of flowers will translate into very, very few berries.
After about 6 weeks of berry growth, veraison signifies the beginning of the ripening period, as grapes accumulate color, sugar, and flavor.
In Chardonnay, or the white wine varieties that we have, the gourd green turns into a slightly more muted green. In red varieties that we grow, obviously, you'll start seeing some pink.
We go through at that point and we take off any green bunches.
many factors influence when farmers begin to harvest. Brix measurement, which corresponds to the amount of sugar in the grapes, can be an important consideration, as can impending weather or the availability of a harvest crew.
Depending on the variety, depending on the winemaker's preference, Sauvignon Blanc may come in at 22 or 23 Brix, where Chardonnay is going to be, could be from 23 to 25. The reds, the big reds, the Merlots, the Cab Francs, the Cabernet Sauvignons, they're going to be up to maybe 26, 27, all in the hands of the winemaker's decision.
As the vine prepares for winter, the shoots harden into canes as energy is transported into the vine's trunk and roots to be used the following spring.
What really starts a vine into entering into dormancy is shorter day lengths.
Leaf fall signifies the beginning of winter dormancy, and from here, the cycle will start again.
You know, as I joke with people, you know, how farming got its name is because gambling was already taken. So that's where it comes down to Mother Nature at its finest.
The main challenge is weather. It's the thing that affects us most that we have no control over.
Hail, spring frost, drought, excessive heat, and rain can reduce yields or damage fruit quality in a given year, and pests and disease can threaten the longevity of a vineyard.
The most common vine disease in Sonoma County is powdery mildew. It's something that growers have to be proactively preparing for and acting on beginning at bud break. As it's becoming ripe, it's loaded with sugar, and after it gets riper, that sugar will leak through the skin of the berry, and the naturally occurring fungi that are in our vineyards will really appreciate that food source on the surface of the berry, and that's when we have a disease that is called Botrytis bunch rot.
Grapevine viruses such as leaf roll and bacterial diseases such as Pierce's are transmitted via insects and require careful attention.
We're trying to get 25 to 30 years out of a vineyard. With some viruses, it'll reduce it down to 10.
Use integrated pest management, which is a process by which we assess the level of the pests, of the insect pest or disease, to determine what type of control measure there is. And that control measure ranges from cultural practices to canopy management practices, vineyard floor practices, and maybe some pesticides.
One of the biggest threats to the current ways of farming is the shortage of labor.
Our crops need hand labor, and we're having to solve that right now.
As technology develops and labor costs rise, we can expect increasing mechanization in the vineyard. Sustainability is a crucial topic for growers today. It involves factors in the vineyard ranging from fertilization to water usage, and economic factors from labor to land management.
I'm hoping that my kids are the 6th generation, so I want to make every decision now, not just for myself, but also for how it's going to affect them into their farming future.
Really, at the end of the day, our land is here. Fortunately, we're stuck here because it's one of the best places in the world to grow wine grapes. So it's really that collaboration and really understanding kind of we're all in it together.
What it means to me is if we can institute practices today that would help assure that either my kids or my grandkids, just as our grandparents did, provide opportunities to continue farming in the county. That's, to me, what sustainability is, making it a long-term last.